All right. Well, welcome back to Mental Health with Amanda. Today, I'm joined by Daniel Maigler, who is a licensed clinical social worker. He's been working full-time in high schools since 2000 and as a therapist in private practice since 2005. In May of 2020, Dan lost Patrick Romer, one of his students, to suicide. When his family formed Paws for Patrick to help connect young people with mental health challenges to emotional support animals, Dan joined the board as a mental health advisor. Dan is also the host of Not Allowed to Die, a podcast about mental health treatment from the therapist perspective, along with his co-host, is it Mariska?
Mariska. Yeah.
Mariska, the two-toothed Patterdale Terrier. So, Daniel, thank you for joining us today.
It's my fantastic pleasure.
Yeah. So before we get into more of your work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you to go into the mental health field?
Yeah, when I was young, I thought I wanted to go into government and politics. And in college, I was a poli-sci history major. And then I started working on political campaigns, as you do when you're an intern. And I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is really gross. No one
Yeah.
really wants to help anyone. Everyone just
Yeah.
cares who's sitting where and who's giving campaign contributions. So I had worked for a nonprofit called the Center for Violence Interruption, Illinois Council Against Handgun Violence. And they connected me to a place called the Center for Violence Interruption. And so my first job out of college was teaching violence prevention programming to kids who've been kicked out of Chicago public schools.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
I loved it. The direct service really scratched that itch of helping
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
But I wanted to make more than $19,000 a year. So
Mhm.
I said to people, well, what do I study for this? And they're like, you got to go into social work school.
Yeah.
So I went back to get my master's in social work. And as most of the people in social work school, I had a lot of familiarity with mental health. My family had every DSM diagnosis.
Okay.
At every holiday, there was someone who was having hallucinations or a manic
Yep.
break or things
Something.
like that.
Hmm.
So, it was very comfortable territory for me.
Hmm.
And so it was like the chocolate, the peanut butter met, and I was able to find an area which I really enjoyed and felt like I could bring my life experience to.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. Well, I definitely want to hear more about Pause for Patrick. So, what that organization is, how do you become involved? Like, share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Patrick Romer, I worked with him from his freshman year into his senior year.
Hmm.
And his journey, his mental health challenges, he and his family tried everything from regular therapy to working at the school to doing um, therapeutic wilderness program and whatnot.
Yeah.
And the only constant that really worked for Patrick was his dog Cece.
Okay.
See, I remember days when he would come down to my office in the school and he wouldn't even be able to speak. And I would just say, do you just need to be with Cece? And he would just nod his head and then talk to his mom and he would go home.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the first day of his senior year of high school, Cece died unexpectedly.
Oh
She
gosh.
was only
Okay.
6 years old. And so that losing that bond, that connection was devastating for Patrick. And they
Hmm.
got another dog, Indy, and they had cats and things like that. But that gap that was there for Patrick, Cece was just a safe place,
Hmm.
someone that knew and understood without him having to use any kind of words.
Yeah.
And so I knew there was trauma that he wasn't ready to talk about. And we had talked about the fact that he didn't want to talk about it until he was over 18 because he wanted all of his mental health choices to be made by himself with no other
Okay.
input.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he didn't turn 18 until the spring of his senior year. And in March, that's when COVID hit and it was
Oh
shut down.
gosh.
And so
Okay.
I lost contact with him then. But he, with his family, was having a great time during COVID. They actually organized a pet Olympics and we were
Okay.
doing wonderful things. But then he had one really bad day. And unfortunately, that day, he ended his life. And
Okay.
so his family had all these people reaching out to them and donating and whatnot. And they knew they wanted to do something with the money. And so they
Mhm.
said, we know it's got to be something with mental health and something with animals. And
Yeah.
so in August of 2020, they gathered a bunch of people together and we formed Paws for Patrick to help connect people to emotional support animals.
Yeah.
And so we have in the Chicago area, we actually have therapy dog handler teams that go out and visit schools and
Okay.
therapeutic day programs and things like that. But we've helped people in all 50 states to get emotional support animal letters. And if people do adopt an animal from a shelter, we can help reimburse them for up to like $300 to get reimbursement for doing that if they have a young person with a mental health challenge in their family. And we define
Yeah.
young as 30 and younger. So if
Okay.
you're a therapist and you have a client who could benefit from that, or again, if they
Yeah.
have a child they can go to pawsforpatrick.org and we can hook them up with someone. If a clinician who doesn't feel comfortable writing an ESA letter, we can
Mhm.
connect them with a clinician who will.
Okay.
Otherwise, we can help with money for adoption and a little bit of money for training, so they can get a little bit of that good citizenship training, so they're not barking and bothering neighbors and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so if I was a listener, like hearing what you have to say, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I think I would benefit from that. You said they could obviously go to the website, but what's the process of like talking to a therapist or getting a letter written? Like, what does that look like?
So yeah, I mean, if a person's already working with a therapist, they might say, I think I'd like to have an ESA letter so that
Hmm.
way I can live in no pet housing. I won't have to pay pet fees or a pet deposit
Yep.
if my landlord is trying to charge those things. And so
Hmm.
then the therapist would talk to them about, is there a nexus? Is there a connection between you're having this animal and you feeling better? And
Hmm.
let's say the person's never owned an animal, but they
Yeah.
know every time they go over to their friend's house, they're playing with the cat and they just feel that much better. But as a
Hmm.
therapist, I don't have to have a certainty. I just have to have a reasonable belief that this animal
Yeah.
might reduce the
Yeah.
frequency, intensity, or duration of symptoms. And then for
Hmm.
me as a therapist, writing the letter is really simple. I just say, I know this client, I'm familiar with their history, and I just certify that on my own letterhead. And
Yeah.
for when you're experienced doing it, and particularly if you know the client well, writing the
Hmm.
letters is very easy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of big practices will say we're concerned about liability, and so that's okay. There are other people to refer to.
Yeah.
So if a person has a letter from their therapist, they can go to the Paws for
Hmm.
Patrick website and they can upload that into that form, and so that
Okay.
we can help them. Or if they say no, I don't have a therapist yet, then we'll connect them with one. We
Okay.
use a couple of different companies. Certiped is one of them, but there are some other companies as well that
Okay.
evaluate people. And some people say, well, these are just a mill where you just pay your money and you get your letter.
Yeah.
But the clinicians who are doing that work
Mm.
they're putting their license on the line. They
Yep.
wouldn't do that if they didn't believe the person
Yeah.
actually had a mental health condition. So
Yeah.
some people who are critical will say, well, how can a person really know in one interview? And when I
Mhm.
used to work in an emergency room, I had to decide sometimes in 15 or 20 minutes if a person
That's
could go
right.
home or if they had to
Yep.
stay in. So
Yeah.
sometimes mental health analysis isn't terribly complicated. If a person
Yeah.
says, okay, I've been dealing with depression for 20 years and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, I pretty much know where I'm going right
Yes.
away. So yeah.
Well, and I feel like people that have that mindset where they're a little judgmental about it tend to be maybe uneducated or not like they're not aware of, they're not therapists. Like you don't
Mhm.
hear therapists saying that. So just like it just seems like you can just go see a therapist and say, yeah, my dog makes you feel good and get a letter. There is more that goes into that. They just don't understand it because they haven't been on that end of it.
But I mean, for me, honestly, I feel like the way we feel about animals helping people should be the way we feel about music helping people.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
there was a law against me having music in my apartment,
Yep.
then I, as a
Yep.
therapist, would be willing to write a letter for almost everyone to have music because it does really help people's mental health. Well,
Yep.
animals really help people's mental health. But just like with your music, you can't blast your music at 3 a.m. You have to be a responsible neighbor.
Yeah.
And with an ESA, with an emotional support animal, if your dog is barking at 3 a.m. or if you have an orangutan and it's tearing up the
Mhm.
floors, you're going to be responsible for that. So I think
Exactly.
some people have this idea that it's some kind of get out of jail free card, but we shouldn't have high barriers. I've
Yeah.
worked with a couple of people who were in homeless shelters and they could
Hmm.
not leave the homeless shelter until they got an ESA letter. So
Hmm.
if we want to be gatekeepers, we're keeping people out of housing. And that's really
Yeah.
tragic to me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is. And I like it reminds me when you say like homeless people and like the posts that I've seen with these homeless people who barely have food for themselves but have a dog where you
Hmm.
can see them, they have their pet with them and they're like caring for that dog like it's a child, almost giving
Hmm.
their dog more than they are giving themselves. If that doesn't speak volumes,
Yeah. Well,
it's
and for
crazy.
people who, when we think about the unhoused population, a lot of times these are people who have a dual diagnosis of maybe schizophrenia or bipolar and substance abuse issues. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really challenging for them to maintain healthy relationships with people. But
Yeah.
we know the research all says that, particularly for schizophrenia, the number one indicator of how well the person's going to be doing is the number of relationships and connections that they have in their life.
Yeah.
And that animal may help them, and it may also help them to feel safe. If a person's on the streets, that if they can sleep more easily knowing that someone who's got better senses than they are is going to be aware if someone's going to try to
Yeah.
steal their things, if someone's going to try to attack
Absolutely.
them. So
Yeah.
again, people think, oh, what's the big deal? It's just an animal. And it's like, well, and there's a great book called Running with Sherman that Franzi
Mhm.
Romer, Patrick's mother, she bought for all the members of the Paws for Patrick board.
Okay.
And it's about a true story of this guy who was a reporter, and he adopts this very dilapidated animal, this donkey, and he learns to run with it. But they talk about in the book about how for all of human history, we've been around animals. It's really
Yeah.
only since we've moved to cities that it seems unnatural for us to be living
Yeah.
with animals. But
That's
animals
true.
are a part of our natural state in helping regulate ourselves, is being
Yep.
around them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have two dogs, so I'm like they are like, and I don't need an ESA letter, but I absolutely would say they're emotional support. Like and dogs, I don't know if it's like that for all animals, but like they're aware. They're aware of your emotions. They're aware. They know. Like if I have a hard day, I can almost tell my dogs are like they're closer to me. They're like
Mhm.
almost trying to comfort me more than they normally do. It's like they can sense it.
Mhm.
And to discount that for anyone is would be crazy.
Well, and it's funny, Dr. Janet Lloyd Gerlach of the University of Toledo, she did some of the first research on ESAs. And what shocked me is they found that cats are actually somewhat more effective than dogs in
Really?
helping with symptoms of depression.
Interesting.
But the cool thing
Okay.
about ESAs is the ESA doesn't have to know it's making an impact. It could be a
Right.
fish, it could be a
Yep.
tarantula.
Yep.
It's for that person sometimes to go home and know I'm
Mhm.
coming home to my bird, I'm coming home to my octopus, and I
Yes.
don't feel alone.
Yeah.
And so it really makes a difference for people. And we just want to remove some of the barriers for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you're talking to, I'm thinking about how I just had a conversation the other day about movies where animals die, especially,
Mm.
like, and I'm
Yeah,
just
those
like
are hard.
the fact that like I think a lot of humans, it's like we unfortunately are used to seeing humans being killed off in movies and stuff, but when an animal dies, I'm like, I'm not watching it. I'm not
Right.
watching it. I can't handle it. I can't. So there is just that bond that I think can't be replaced,
Mm-hmm.
with an animal and really bond. So what I would like to hear, if you can, maybe tell us the difference between, which I think some people get confused with, like emotional support animals, therapy animals, service animals. Like, what are
Mm-hmm.
the differences?
Yeah. So an ESA letter or an ESA is the lowest level of training. In fact, it requires no training whatsoever. It's just a certification that, and again, people mistakenly think that they need to get their animal registered as an ESA.
Yeah.
And the letter is like, it's almost like it's more like I get a prescription for, amoxicillin or whatnot. The prescription is for me. It's not for the pill bottle.
Yeah.
But so an ESA needs no training, and the ESA letter really only applies to your dwelling. There
Hmm.
was a lot of controversy when ESAs were allowed to fly for free. And then it
Hmm.
seemed like more people were trying to maybe work the system. But
Hmm.
so the ESA letter essentially or just says that a person, if housing is covered by HUD and FHA, that they are allowed, people are not allowed to be able to charge pet fees or pet deposits. And that's all it
Okay.
means. A therapy animal, like a therapy dog, we often think of, or sometimes therapy horses, is an
Hmm.
animal that is trained to be around people and be touched by them and interact with them and help to
Hmm.
soothe them.
Okay.
So a lot of times for therapy dogs, they're generally only allowed to work about 1 hour every other day.
Okay.
Now, a subset of therapy animals is called facility animals. So
Okay.
sometimes at a hospital or a courthouse or a number of other places, they'll have an animal schools that are just trained to be there all day. And then people
Yeah.
can come and interact with them. And those
Okay.
animals can work a lot longer because they're familiar with the environment. But
Hmm.
again, their focus and training has to be focused outward toward other people.
Okay.
The highest level of training is a service animal. And a
Hmm.
service animal is an animal that is trained. We often think of like seeing eye dogs for the blind,
Yeah.
but there's a person with a disability, and the
Mhm.
animal is trained to do something to help remediate that disability. So for
Okay.
some people, it could be they can smell when seizures are going to come on, or if,
Mhm.
for a diabetic person, their blood sugar is getting low.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
psychiatric service animals that can be trained that if a person's having a panic or an anxiety attack, if they're disassociating, they can be
Yeah.
trained to lick that person's face, to rub up against them. So, in
Yeah.
order for something to be a service animal, it needs to have specific training
Mhm.
related to that person's disability.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, that helps a lot. So the ESAs, the servicing and I think like so the service animals are kind of like what you see in the schools and stuff too, or no? Is that
Well, so
different?
in general, the only animals that are allowed to have go anywhere are service animals.
Okay.
So therapy animals are only allowed if they're invited in. So
Okay.
if they're visiting a school with a handler, that might be a therapy animal or a facility
Okay.
dog.
Okay. That makes
And they're
sense.
trained a lot of times. So if people are interested, if they want to get their animal
Hmm.
trained and certified? There is no specific training, but organizations like Alliance for Therapy Dogs, and there are other organizations around, they will put people through a test in order to be able to join them. And what the test generally has to show is that they're non-reactive. They can be around other people, other animals, and this is the toughest thing for most dogs, is they can't go up and smell the other dogs. They have to stay in their lane.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if they pass that certification, and a lot of times they'll take them to Home Depot, they'll take them to other places like that, then they can be insured. And that's what we really want. And schools or other places won't let you in unless something does go wrong, they're insured. But yes, so again, we should think ESAs are only in your home. The therapy animals are only in places where they're invited. And then service animals can go anywhere.
Anywhere. Okay, that makes sense. All right. So have you had any experiences with like clients that you are like, you would really benefit from an ESA and they get one and you've seen huge changes for them?
Yes. And again, I've had that happens all the time where I see the huge positive changes. So we'll start with the positive. I'll talk about sometimes it can go wrong, but the positive changes, and particularly we'll see sometimes with these families, and where I see the greatest change is for like nonverbal autistic kids.
Yeah.
Where sometimes these kids they find people misunderstand about autism, but they think the person is not interested, but they're just overwhelmed by stimuli. And so by focusing on the animal, they're not expected to make eye contact. They can pet the animal, they can be around them, and they can just loosen. They're not expected to speak. And so that animal, and again, we talked before about how the animal just knows. Well, they just know, and they can be there and they can connect. And you can see in the body language and the posture, everything. But I often see for so many of the people I work with, and you've probably experienced this, people who feel like they're a burden. They feel like they're worthless. They may have body image issues or things like that. But their dog doesn't care what you look like. It doesn't care what you're wearing. And you get to be the helper for that animal. Time and again, and I mean, I and so many other therapists have stories of people who were suicidal. And they said, when you ask them, what's keeping you here? Well, I need to take care of Mitzi. I need to make sure that she's okay. And so it helps to change that role of I am always the help receiver to I can be the help giver. And this idea of reciprocity and a true bond, and that we don't have to be the same for us both to be benefiting. So it's a beautiful thing to see.
Yeah, I love that. And I know that as a therapist working with clients who are suicidal, that's always been one thing where if someone comes in and tells me they have some suicidal ideation, I'm doing everything I can to avoid hospitalizing them. We know that doesn't really help. Sometimes makes things worse. So safety plans and all of that, but like, what's your reason for living? And, a lot of times it's, you have kids, just tell me something like I feel this way, but I'm not going to do it because, and animals absolutely could be that. It's like, well, who's going to take care of that animal, if you're gone? And if that's what keeps you alive, let's focus on that. I'm all about that. Yeah, it gives you a reason.
Yeah, and so that's for sometimes as a clinician, it's hard to say, well, when wouldn't you recommend? Because it's such an incredibly cost-effective benefit to people. Because the best therapist in the world isn't going to be there at 3 a.m. In fact, I hope they have the boundaries to not be there.
Right. Exactly.
But you can cuddle with your dog, you can cuddle with your cat. If you're a lot of times when we're having that freak out, when we're having that bad day of work, that emotional support animal's on call all the time.
Yeah.
So, but again, I have one client who I wish I could recommend an emotional support animal for her, because a lot of times she's really lonely and she's really frustrated, and she lives with her husband in a new town that she moved from the north to the south. But she doesn't love animals. We're not going to recommend something that's not going to be a fit.
Yeah, that would be different.
It's not a one size fits all. It doesn't fit for everyone.
Yeah, no, that's
true. In addition, I have some clients who love animals. They love them so much, but they love them perhaps too much, and again, this is something we should talk responsibly about. Your animal, hopefully, you will outlive them, just like Patrick dealt with that.
Yeah.
So when a person is getting an emotional support animal, or if they have one, as therapists, we need to talk to people about, so what's your plan for transition?
Yeah.
My Mariska, my 2-tooth Patterdale Terrier, she's 16 years old and she has cancer. And I know her time on this planet is, she only has so much more time being the co-host of the podcast. Right. But, then if I was dependent on that, just like if we were dependent on a wheelchair for mobility, well, what are we going to do when this is gone?
Right. Yep. Yeah.
So we have to be another client I had who he took in an animal he adopted her. She was a rescue. And he lived in a high rise in downtown Chicago. But unfortunately, she had anxiety. And every time he left, she would howl. So he came home one day to his door being open by the fire department.
Yeah.
So we want the animals to reduce anxiety and stress and tension and not increase it. So we have
Yeah.
to talk about, fortunately, he was able to find a place to rehome her, and he and his wife have a little dog named Pepper now, and it's all working out. But,
Yeah.
so we have to think these things through. We
Mhm.
never want to put an animal in an unsafe situation either. So if a
Right.
person's living
Right.
with some other people who would not be safe to animals, unfortunately, we know in intimate partner violence relationships, a lot of
Yeah.
times that's a threat. And there's a
Yeah.
program called the Purple Leash Project through, I believe it's Purina, but one of the pet food companies, that if a person's living in an intimate partner violence situation, but they're staying there because they don't know what to do with their pet because they can't bring their
Yeah.
pet to a shelter. The Purple
Hmm.
Leash Project helps find temporary shelters for people so
That's
they can
amazing.
leave a negative situation.
Okay. Yeah, that's amazing because that's and staying for the animal, which just shows the amount of love you have for it, but
Hmm.
also you're at risk. And then I've seen a lot and heard stories of people in domestic violence. I mean, they're violent towards you, they're also violent towards the animal, and the animal
Hmm.
needs to get out of there too.
Yeah.
So, there's no holding back on that when someone has a violence issue. So, well, that's really cool. And that's such great information. I feel like I think I told you a brief podcast on like 5 minutes or something on emotional support animals. And I was surprised at how many people reached out and were like, I
Hmm.
need one, I need one, I need one. So this is gonna
Yeah.
be really great for resources for people. Um, Switching over a little bit to the client that you lost to suicide, can you tell us a little bit about what that was like for you as a therapist? I think that's every therapist's worst nightmare, kind of
Hmm.
like we don't ever want. So how did you handle that?
I think I went through the stages of grief like we all do, and
Hmm.
particularly that bargaining. What could I have done? Searching my
Yeah,
mind over and over.
yeah,
And I think the thing that helped me the most was realizing it was his show. I'm
yeah.
on his show. Just
Hmm.
like if I had a client who was an Academy Award winner, I don't get to take that trophy.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
get to take credit when my client gets a raise, and I don't
Hmm.
get to take the blame when something happens for my client.
I love that.
So
Yeah.
again, if I believe in his agency, that was his story and his choice, and is
Mm.
still hard, absolutely devastatingly hard.
Yeah, yeah,
But it was such a gift that was given to me by Patrick's family to, because that's the people that you feel like are going to be most frustrated with you, upset with you.
absolutely. Yeah.
Um, and the fact that they reached out to me and wanted me to be a part of their healing journey. And I
Mm.
think as well, finding Paws for Patrick and a place to volunteer to give back, to turn that
Yeah,
pain into something else. So
yeah.
that really helped me. Unfortunately, about a year after Patrick died, my own nephew, who was 26 years old, died by suicide.
Wow.
And so to lose him in my own family, and again, as we
Yeah,
talked about, we have these kind of, many of us have families that have gone through it. But
right.
it was able to say, okay, now I can punch back against this depression, this anxiety, these things that I can't help my nephew. One of the
Yeah.
things I learned, I didn't realize until talking with Franzi and some of the other family, that suicide prevention can be considered offensive, that term, by a lot
Mm.
of suicide loss survivors.
Interesting.
Because what it implies is that every suicide is preventable. And if every
Yeah,
suicide is preventable, then they as the family must have screwed up somehow.
yeah,
And
yeah.
instead,
That's true.
if we look at suicidality being like cancer, and that
Hmm.
the vast majority of cancers can be treated, but some are bad enough where the person is not going to survive.
Yeah.
What our job as the treatment team or the family, the people loving that person is to give them the most comfort and care as we can,
Yeah.
to make sure nothing's being missed.
Mhm.
But no one necessarily failed because someone died
Yeah.
by suicide. It's just really frustrating and awful. Just like when a person dies because, they got mislabeled medication or something else like that. Mistakes may have been made, but it's not anybody's fault. It's just,
Yeah.
a combination or an allergy or an embolism.
Yeah, and it sounds like you had a lot of interaction with the family as you were working with him anyway. So they were
Mm-hmm.
close with you kind of along that journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I had to
Yeah.
mention that.
And that's, I actually was able, they allowed me to be part of his eulogy and whatnot. And so, I mean, it was a very healing thing to participate. But I have tattoos, like, let's see. So this is Patrick's artwork. And it's
Oh,
actually the
wow.
logo of Paws for Patrick, because I wanted to
Okay.
be able to think about him every single day. And then
Mhm.
I lost, unfortunately, another a student who was a freshman in college. I hadn't talked to him in about 6 or 7 months, but his freshman year. So these
Yeah.
experiences, every time it happens, it's devastating.
Yeah, for
But I
sure.
remember, the day actually my I lost my nephew. I came from his apartment where I was with my brother while the police were getting his body and whatnot. And I actually had to go into work that day, and I had to
Okay.
do a suicide risk assessment that day.
Oh,
And I was concerned, like, will I be able to remain objective, or
yeah.
will the impact of what I've been through color my judgment.
Sure.
And I wouldn't have been mad at myself if it had. I would have felt that was
Yeah.
a normal human response. And I'm really lucky that I work at a school with other professionals where we can check our judgment with each other.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's
But I
so
was
important.
able to assess that student and say, no, to your point, this student does not need to go to the hospital. This is a
Mhm.
person who's had chronic suicidal ideation. Nothing has changed here. So I did the assessment. I thought, this is what I'm thinking, then went and
Yeah.
checked with a colleague, and
Yeah.
we were on the same page. But so as much as it was awful and devastating, I'm still able to separate that out and say, okay, I'm at work here. I'm doing my assessment role. So even though I know what the stakes are, and I do think though, my clients knowing that I really know what I'm talking about when I
Yes.
tell them, you
Yeah.
think no one's going to care. You think it's not going to
Mhm.
impact anyone. And I'm here to
Mhm.
tell you, as a
It
suicide loss
does.
survivor,
Yes.
you're wrong.
Yeah.
Your life really matters, even to people you've never met.
Yeah, and suicide is like, it's such a strong word. It can be very scary, and I know I've had more clients than I can count that are like in session and like I want to share something, but I'm afraid, like I don't want, they just don't even want to say it.
Hmm.
And it's, as therapists, we're used to working with it, so it's like it's not scary to us. We want you to tell us about how you're feeling, but with what you've gone through and having losses like that, um would you, like, what advice, I guess, would you give other therapists that are dealing with clients that maybe more like are more suicidal or more at risk for suicide?
Well, I remember early in my career, I got to go see a psychiatric grand rounds at the hospital where I was working.
Mhm.
And what it was such a gift to me, this speaker said, if you're doing the hard work, the important work,
Mhm.
you are going to lose someone over the course of your career.
Yeah.
And I thought, at 23 or so, or I'm like, well, no, it's not going to be me. It's not going to happen to me.
Yeah. Of course
But,
not.
but in thinking, my best friend is an ER doctor. And
Mhm.
I wouldn't think of him as a bad doctor because someone dies on his
Right.
shift.
Right.
And so we realized that it's going to happen if we're
Mhm.
doing the important work.
Yeah. Yeah.
That being said, you are going to question yourself.
Mhm.
And so you need to have a consultation group, things like that, so that you don't feel like you're doing any of this on your own.
Right.
I remember hearing in grad school, when in doubt, consult. If you're afraid to consult, you're probably doing something wrong. So
Yes. Absolutely.
having those people you trust to
Mhm.
share with and to
Mhm.
share your self questioning, anything that you're worried about, you're wondering about. And it doesn't have to be about suicidality. It can be about, am I operating out of the scope of my practice? This person has an
Yep.
eating disorder, but they want to keep working with me, but I don't, so,
Yep.
having those other people and sharing that our clients do matter to us and letting to me, and I think you and I may come from a similar mental school of thought of, I love my clients.
Yeah.
And I
Yep.
know, there's some people say, well, we have to keep that detachment. And that's great. For some people, that's the fit that they need.
Right.
They need that increased professionalism. It gives them the space
Yeah.
to feel like they can just say whatever. I think
Mhm.
my clients like the fact that I am really in it. I'm invested in them. They
Yes,
matter
you're
to me.
genuine. Yeah.
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 And I've always said there may come a day where it just takes too much of a toll and I need to go find something else to do.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
that's okay. I'm willing to take that risk,
Hmm.
but I love it every day. If I dream that
Yeah.
my job is to just reduce all suffering, well, I'm never going to get rid of all of it, but I
Right.
can take some of it down.
To be a light for someone, right? Like, I feel like we certainly have our hard days too. And maybe you have days where you're just drained and don't feel the energy to do it, but you do it anyway. But for the most part, I think the really good therapists, and the reason why a lot of people go into therapy is because we have a heart for helping others.
Hmm.
And yes, I think I'm seeing more and more, maybe it's just social media, but like this debate on how we're taught in therapy to be very blank slate,
Hmm.
not sharing, self-disclosing, like I'm just this therapist that's going to help guide you through. But as you said, like my experience has been the more genuine and real I am with someone, the more I connect with them and they see
Hmm.
me as a human friend that's a professional, but like not like I'm up here, you're down
Right.
here. It's like I'm actually invested in your life. Like I'm not taking it home with me in an unhealthy way, but I am invested and
Hmm.
that's what I'm here to do. So I see so much more growth with clients who have those kinds of experiences as opposed to being with a therapist who might have the knowledge but not the connection.
Yeah.
Yeah,
When
that's
it,
okay.
I think that's true for so many people when in working with teenagers and parents and things like that, and that idea of connecting with them.
Yeah.
When the best way I get to connecting with teenagers, particularly those that don't want to open up, is I allow
Yeah.
them to educate me. And I
Hmm.
realized that there is something I can learn from every client that's ever walked into my
Yep.
office. They
Yeah.
know about parts of the world. They might know about, bird watching or beekeeping, or particularly with the young people, they know about music. They know
Yes.
about video games.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
allowing them to educate me and truly coming to them with curiosity and respect,
Hmm.
when they can see that I come to them with that they are a fountain of knowledge that I can learn from. And again, I'm not using their time to just steal ideas, but at the same time, having that genuine curiosity, that's what respect is. And that's what makes it
Yeah. Yeah.
reciprocity with that.
Absolutely, especially with teenagers that feel like they're probably barked at all day by the
Hmm.
parents, teachers, whatever, to have someone who's actually interested in them and is like, wait, you can teach me something. It builds
Hmm.
up their self-worth,
Hmm.
obviously, your relationship with them. So you have worked with more than over 1,000 teenagers.
Hmm.
I know I have clinicians in my practice every so often who are like, absolutely no to teenagers. So what drew you to working with that age group?
Well, as I said, my first job, I just kind of fell into it.
Okay.
And I found, but it was interesting. We worked in the Chicago public schools, but in the summertime, there was no school. And so they sent us to the Chicago Day Reporting Center for men who were on house arrest.
Yeah.
And I remember
Oh.
hearing this man who was in his 50s, and we did a 2-day workshop with them, and we were talking to them about male socialization and how it led to violence. And he
Hmm.
came back the next day and he was super excited because he said, I pulled these young boys aside in my neighborhood and I started talking to them about some of the things you told me. He said, I
Hmm.
just wish someone would have told me these things when I was 13.
Yeah.
And so while there's incredible value in working with adults who have the wisdom of life experience to look back and maybe apply things and make change, to me, the more I can give to a person when they're a little bit younger, then perhaps I can help them to avoid some of that pain that might
Yeah.
be in the future.
Yeah. And they're kind of like you're a vat of knowledge and they want it to, if you develop a relationship with them,
Mm-hmm.
then you can, in a lot of ways, in a healthy way, mold some of the healthier behaviors that otherwise they wouldn't have gotten, which is really cool. What do you think adults fundamentally misunderstand about teenagers or adolescents?
Well, there's this great, I don't know if it was Malcolm Gladwell or whatnot in one of his books, but talks about why those stop smoking campaigns where they showed you how horrible it is don't work. It's because
Hmm.
the way teenagers evaluate risk, and
Hmm.
the more that you say that this is dangerous, the more it may be appealing to them. So you're
Yep.
going the wrong direction with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
instead of you're not going to scare teenagers out of making bad choices. We want
Hmm.
to say, hey, when you're in a bad situation, when you've made that bad choice, if you
Hmm.
do find that, okay, now you're in the car crash has happened, your friend has been sexually assaulted, you just got the STI test back or the
Yeah.
pregnancy test back, what would be some ways that you would handle it? And
Yeah.
so trusting them that we are the same people we were when we were 15. We're
Hmm.
not more intelligent. We just have more life experience
Right.
and we're maybe a little bit more patient. But
Hmm.
so kids are intelligent. They know answers. And so the more
Yeah.
you use scenarios to brainstorm with them about, okay, hey, I just heard this friend or your cousin had this experience. Instead of
Mm.
saying, don't ever get pregnant or don't have this thing occur,
Right.
say, what do you think? What would you do? And
Hmm.
again, as parents, as adults, let them be the experts and find out what are the things that they're thinking. And
Yeah.
maybe that then we can perhaps plant a seed. But so we're
Hmm.
not going to scare people.
Hmm.
There's two main ways of running your engine: running
Yeah.
it on fear or running it on desire.
Yeah.
So if we want teenagers to listen to us, the more we can find out about what their dreams are and
Hmm.
connect them to things that might be related to it that they've never thought about, connect
Yeah.
them to people. So
Yeah.
often everyone's obsessed asking teenagers, and this is the two things they hate the worst is when people ask about, are you dating anyone? Or,
Yeah.
so what about college? And
Yes.
they
Yeah.
just, they're like, kill me. So instead we want to just say, hey, what are you interested in? Like, what
Hmm.
motivates you? What do you want to be
Hmm.
doing when you're 50?
Yeah.
What is a good life? And typically it's okay that their answers can be, I don't know. And so
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, well, what do you know you don't want to do? And
Hmm.
and so helping them to
That's an
close those
easier
things off.
answer maybe
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
Yes. But
So definitely not what mom or dad does, and so
yes.
then it's like, okay,
Yeah.
then how do we
They could
connect
get
them to
older
that
and
dream?
change their mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean their brains, I always tell parents, I mean, you got to remember their brains are not fully developed. So
Mhm.
the way that they're just trying to make sense of their world. It's interesting when I say some of my clinicians that are like, no, I don't want to see teenagers. I'll tell you most of the reason why they say that is because of the parents.
Yeah.
And how difficult it can be to work with a teenager and then handle the parents. So can you talk a little bit about that and how that's been for you or how you manage it?
Well, that's one of the incredible blessings of working in a school is
Hmm.
I can actually keep the parents out of the conversation. That's one of the things that people don't realize about the school social workers, school counselors,
Yeah.
psychologists. What's awesome is they don't have to necessarily set up an appointment. They, teenagers, they may not know. When I ask my teenage son, "What
Yeah.
are you going to go do with your friends?" I don't know. So
Yeah.
they're very in the moment. So the
Hmm.
fact that they can come down to my office when they're feeling what they're feeling, and I don't
Hmm.
have to charge them, that we don't have to
That's
deal with billing.
nice.
That some
Yeah.
conversations could be just 15 minutes long and be really
Okay.
impactful.
Yeah.
And knowing that I'm not going to talk to their parents. But when I do work with teenagers outside of, in my private practice, it's
Hmm.
making sure that they have all the say in what gets communicated to their parents.
Right.
That typically I will email and let them read it before I send it,
Yep.
so that, okay, this is the information that's being shared. If
Right.
there's going to be a phone call, that they're going to be there present. So they're going to hear
Yes.
everything that I said, and
Yeah.
they're in control of that information sharing. Now, sometimes if it is,
Mhm.
suicidality, homicidal, something else like that, I do need to inform their parents about.
Right.
I'll even game plan with them beforehand. How's this exactly going to go?
Hmm.
Very
Hmm.
frequent when I do, unfortunately, when I have to send kids to the hospital, we'll say,
Yeah.
and I'll write up a letter with them. You said this to me at this time. Let them read it over so they can take that with them to the
Yeah.
hospital. Because I
Yeah.
used to have this problem of kids coming back after I would send them to the hospital, and the hospital would kick them back, and they'd say, "Hey, what happened here?" Well, did they ask all
Hmm.
the right questions? Did
Right.
Was the kid actually repeating what they told me?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
sometimes they would get pressure from their parents. You're fine. You're fine. Tell them that you're fine.
Yep.
And so the fact that I
Hmm.
was giving them a document to no, you wrote down at this point, or I
Yes.
wrote down, and then the person at the hospital is not going to take on the liability of letting them go home if they know that they said X, Y,
Right.
and Z.
Yes, they have that with them. Hmm.
But it's about saying, believing that even the nastiest parent, wants good things for their child. If they're truly mentally ill and they're destructive, then we're going to be cutting them out completely.
Yeah.
But for the most, that's the challenge, is when we have a parent that very frequently, parents may want to minimize mental
Hmm.
health challenges. The community that I work in is, one of my former coworkers described it as a fine Oriental rug with a lump under the middle of it.
Hmm.
that the parents
Yep.
they were terrified that the neighbors or anyone else might find out something that was going on with their children, and
Yeah.
so they would maybe ignore things for far too long. And also, we all do that with our children. When
Hmm.
a 4-year-old is running and they fall down, the first thing we say is, "You're okay, you're okay." We don't ask
Yep.
them if they're okay. We tell them because we're
Yeah.
afraid that if
Yep.
they'll start freaking out. So parents aren't wrong to, like what I do with my car, ignore the check engine light as long as they can.
Hmm. Yeah.
But we have to empathize with them. And parents
Hmm.
get so frustrated that their kids tell me things that they won't tell them.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course, my own sons are not going to tell me as their dad.
Right.
We
Exactly.
need Kids need someone
Hmm.
outside the family that they can open up to. And it doesn't have to be a therapist.
Yeah.
But so one of the best things, if I could give everyone something, it'd be a really cool aunt. Someone that they've known
Yeah.
for a long period of time, that they
Yep.
know
Trust.
mom's okay with me talking to Aunt Teresa. And
Hmm.
so it's okay if I didn't go to her first,
Yeah.
because they're not threatened by that, because they need someone else outside the
Right.
family sometimes to ask those questions to, about drug or alcohol use, about sexuality, about things. Because if they were fully open and honest with their parents would ground them forever.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the risk. I mean, I know the way I grew up, it was just like, you just don't talk about anything. Just don't talk about your feelings. Don't talk about anything that happened in school. Just everything's fine. But, as a teenager, I held that all in and I
Hmm.
I struggled with a lot and I
Hmm.
needed someone to talk to and I ended up acting out. But like, as you're talking, we have in our practice, because it is a private practice, if we take any child under the age of 18, we require the parents be a part of it.
Hmm.
Not like they're in the session with the child, but like
Right.
we are going to meet with those parents because a lot of what those kids are struggling with, the parents could assist with, and then
Hmm.
of course the child is going to know exactly what we're sharing. We're not oversharing or anything like that. But I've seen so many situations where kids have been, I mean, I had a client once who literally felt suicidal and like she needed to go to the hospital. I told her she needed to, like, I wasn't working with her at that time. She reached out to me over the phone. I was like, you need to talk to your parents and go to the hospital. And her mom was like, seriously? Like, can you just, like, I just want to sleep. Like, why are we doing this? And I'm like, I cannot imagine. And that was a really tough situation for her because she's like, I'm just a burden. And I'm like, no wonder, when you add all of that, it can be just complicated to get parents involved that are not supportive. And then you also have the parents who, um, I feel like, the more that they are involved, sometimes, I mean, I even have friends that see stuff happening with their kids. They'll talk to me about it because I'm a therapist and I'm their friend, but it's like you have to just talk to your kid about it. Just talk to
Mm-hmm.
them. And they're afraid of talking to their own, especially teenagers. I'm afraid. I don't know what they're going to say. And like, what if they say this? I don't know how to respond. And that is something, of course, and I don't know what you would share with your parents, but I know even with my friends and or parents, I'm like, you respond like you don't react. Whatever they say. I've certainly had my kids say stuff to me where inside I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so that's cool. What do you think about that? Like you said, just like act chill. You want to provide your kids with a safe space to come and talk to you about things because if they don't feel safe and they don't have that aunt or that support or that therapist, they need to feel like even though you're the parent, it's not scary to come home and share with you what so and so said at school that was super sexual towards me or that bullying that's happening. And I don't feel like you're going to freak out as my parent.
Well, I love hypotheticals, and I love parents. So if a parent thinks that their daughter might have an eating disorder or whatnot, but
Hmm.
they do have a fear of coming directly at it, or they think my
Hmm.
child won't answer me,
Right.
saying, "Oh, I recently read this article," or the next door neighbor was dealing with this, but also showing that when you're talking about other people, you're being non-judgmental,
Yeah.
particularly for
Yeah.
particularly for queer kids. And I
Hmm.
work with a lot of queer and trans kids, particularly. They clock who's really an ally, not by who's just wearing a rainbow pin, but
Yep.
by how are they talking about people when they don't think anybody queer is around, or racially,
Absolutely.
how are they talking about people when. And so if you want your kids, I'll never forget one of my clients. She was an adult, but her husband and her husband's father, they were laughing about a guy who died falling off a motorcycle, and because this guy had been a drug dealer and whatnot. And she said to me, if they can minimize his life, then they can
Hmm.
minimize my life. And I can never open up about my depression, my struggles. And so
Yep.
the degree to which people realize who is judgmental and who is safe. So if you love that gossip and you like to laugh about people and be a little bit snarky, then don't be surprised if your kid doesn't feel super safe opening up to you.
100%. Yeah, that's great. And that I love that you point that out and the hypotheticals, especially because if you have this assumption, or we know our kids for the most
Mhm.
part, so something's not right. And if you are not willing to get a therapist or even with a therapist, using those hypotheticals when you talk to your kids and like, what do you think about that? Or what would you do? Really helps kind of externalize it for them.
What I normalize both for kids and for parents that it
Hmm.
is also very appropriate for kids to lie and not be ready to talk about something.
Yeah.
That the vast majority of my clients may lie to me 15 times about a drug abuse behavior or something else like that before they're ready to be open about that. And if you're going to
Yep.
be really insulted and hurt that your
Yeah.
child lied to you, I say kids lie to me every single day, and I don't give
Oh.
out detentions. All I do is give
Mhm.
out suckers and candy. I've got nothing
Yeah.
bad, but they lie to me because they're used to lying because that's how they've survived their world.
Yep.
And so
Yeah.
all of these, everything is a coping strategy. And some of
Mm-hmm.
they fall on the negative and the positive side of the number line. But,
Mm-hmm.
and again, or it's like a winter coat. A winter
Yeah.
coat is an excellent thing to have in the winter, but sometimes we
Yeah.
continue to use those coping strategies that have worked for us, even in the wrong environment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
helping parents and kids to understand that the thing that you're doing, and so many of us say, "Oh, I'm so dumb. Why did I do that?" And it's like,
Yeah.
well, because there was a reason. There was a time in your life where that made
Mhm.
sense. And
Yep.
now it's our job to try to figure out how to not use that when we don't need it and use it only when the times we do.
Right. Right. Offer some grace, it sounds like in that situation. It's just like, especially for teenagers, young kids, but adults too. It's like we all mess up. We all do things, we all lie. Sometimes we do those things, like you said, that had a reason. It served us at one point. And the important thing is realizing we don't need that now.
And I think even awesome parents, unfortunately, and I tell kids this, the number one response I get when I have to call up a parent, tell them that their child was sexually assaulted or molested or whatnot, is no, they weren't, and a blanket denial. And I remember
Wow.
being early in my career, I was with a psychologist, and we were one of our students, and she called a mom and had the mom on speaker, and the child had to hear her mom denying that.
Oh,
And this was not a mom who didn't love her child. This was a mom who couldn't deal with the reality because it was too
yeah.
scary, too big, too nasty.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it doesn't mean, and so sometimes I'll have to tell kids, okay, we're going to tell your parents that you're trans. We're going to tell your parents something like that. We've got a plan. Your parents may react in this way, or this way. And what does
Mhm.
that mean? but it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they don't love you or care about you. It might just mean it's going to take a long time for them to internalize this. One of
Yeah.
my students who's trans, they remember we were just having a random conversation about how it often takes parents up to 10 years from when they're told their child has a diagnosis of autism to fully internalize that and to come
Yeah.
through grief of the life script they had created.
Hmm.
And so when that student was coming out to their parents and they realized their parents weren't able to accept that, they were able to keep that seed in the back of their mind and saying they're not able to accept it yet. If 10
Right.
years from
Giving them
now they're
time.
still struggling with understanding who
Hmm.
I am,
Yeah.
then, but it's because it's not just because I'm wrong, I'm bad, but
Right.
that's because we all have a life script that we create for our
Yeah.
children. And letting
Yeah.
go of that can be tough.
That's so true. Yeah. Like you have a script or you have an idea of like what it's going to look like, and it doesn't
Hmm.
turn out like that. So, how your parent also deals with, in that
Hmm.
situation, it could be grief, like
Hmm.
grieving what we thought was going to
Yes.
happen that's not, and
Yes.
now trying to wrap our head around that. So, providing space for that, that's really interesting. So, if you could get every parent of a teenager to stop doing one thing and start doing another, what would that be? What would
I
those
guess I
things
think
be?
I go back to that, letting go of that negativity, that
Mhm.
fear cycle, and allowing their kids more to fail and fall.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think it's the book The Anxious Generation or whatnot, but it's saying that we are really shortchanging a lot of adults.
Hmm.
They're too risk averse because they haven't had enough skin knees and other
Yep.
challenges in childhood.
Yep.
So we let my son paint his room
Mhm.
poorly. We let him cook. But when it does comes to there, you have to have some certain hard lines on
Mhm.
how will we react with substance abuse, with other things
Yeah.
that could kill my child,
Yeah.
and not be angry about it, but say, this is the consequence in our house, have
Sure.
boundaries and consequences and hold to those without anger.
Hmm.
And then also let's role model what a happy scenario, what does in talking to our kids, instead of saying don't with anything,
Hmm.
no with anything, we say what's the model of what healthy relationship with substances looks like at 36.
Yeah.
What's the model of hey, even if it's not in our house, what's the model of what a good marriage looks like?
Yep.
What's the
Yeah.
model of what someone who loves their job looks like? Because
Hmm.
we tell the kids these horror stories. Oh, everyone, I wish I was your age. I hated, growing up's tough. Being a teenager is way harder. But when
Hmm.
we make it all sound terrible, well, of
Yeah.
course they're not going to look forward to that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's be a little bit more realistic and positive, and let's point them in
Hmm.
the examples of the people
Yeah.
we admire and the
Yeah.
people who seem like they're doing it right.
Yeah.
Instead of just so, let's not lead through fear. Let's lead through hope and desire, and
Mhm.
guide them to the people who might help them as
Yeah.
mentors.
Yeah. Yeah, and gosh, you're right. I see this so much, and I think we all do with parents now that are like parenting in fear all the time.
Yes. Hmm.
And then they're creating highly anxious children because
Hmm.
children see that. They can sense it even if you're not saying it, they can sense the fear.
Yeah.
Um, and so then that becomes more of an adult issue where maybe the parent needs therapy to work around how they handle
Yeah.
parenting. Like, how do I let my kid fail and just sit back there and like I'm nervous and I don't want them to fail because I love my kid, but it's like you have to let them fail because when they pick themselves back up, they're actually stronger and healthier. And like if you don't encourage that, then they're never going to be that. But
Yeah.
so many parents struggle with that.
And their own fear that they're going to be considered the failure, that they feel like,
Hmm.
okay, if my child gets accepted to the good bumper sticker university, I've done my job as a
Yes.
parent. And it's
Yes.
like, that's like getting, okay, what good is it to get to the top of the mountain if we don't know how to climb back down?
Right.
And what
Yeah.
is what is the rest of life after getting into bumper
Yep.
sticker university? What does
Yeah.
that look like?
Yeah.
Oh, that's their problem. They can figure that out, but no one's going to judge me as a parent if my kid got into Dartmouth. It's like,
Yes.
well,
Yeah.
let's stop worrying about what grandma and grandpa are going to say to
What other
you as the
people
parent.
think. Exactly. Yes. How are you going to handle it? I mean, parenting is so hard. I just got out of a session with a client who she has a little one, like little two or something. And I'm like, you don't know until you're a parent the reward that you get with it, but also how hard it is. And
Yes.
the stress and the joy goes like this, in parenting, because it's just hard. Like you're never
Hmm.
consistently one or the other, but it's so rewarding at the same time.
Well, I remember hearing this thing that people with children were less happy but more satisfied. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting,
Interesting.
because that
Yeah.
happiness is often, okay, I can get all the creature comforts, I can travel. And there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong. My younger brother and his wife, they chose not to have children. They have a
Yeah.
wonderful dog named Buddy. But
Mhm.
yeah, they might be happier, but
Yeah.
that immortality project. And when I look at my kids, even when they're
Absolutely.
driving me crazy, they like, I do feel a level of satisfaction. So even if it is
Mhm.
hard, it's the best kind of hard.
Yeah. 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 I love that. Kind of coming to close now, what do you wish we were teaching kids about emotions, maybe at 8 or 10 years old, like, that we wish maybe they did I break up?
A little bit. Let's see. Are we back now? I think
Okay,
can you hear me?
sorry. I don't know what's going on with my internet today. So, yeah, what do you wish we were teaching kids about emotions when they're 8 or 10? So their therapists don't have to help them unlearn it when they're 30 or 40.
I think it's something that I stole from Brene Brown, who stole it from someone else. But the idea is we have this fantasy that we are, thinking creatures who happen to feel, instead of
Mm,
realizing that we are feeling creatures who are capable of thought.
yeah.
And the more that we realize that our emotions are like our five senses, they're there to help us keep us alive. That
Hmm.
anger is the emotional equivalent of pain. It's there
Yeah.
to tell you when something needs to change. Anger, when I was a teenager, I really thought that anger and sadness were bad emotions. And I
Yeah.
learned how to intellectualize. So I never felt anger. I never felt sadness. But that
Okay.
numbness that created became a
Yeah.
different problem in my relationships. So
Yeah.
to realize all of your feelings are tools.
Hmm.
And if we can use those tools appropriately to tell us about our world, then
Yeah.
we're going to have a better, happier, longer life. So,
Hmm.
and so many people are shamed into pushing their emotions down or trying to manage or shape them instead
Yeah.
of just listening to them. So
Yeah.
let's listen. What is this about? If I'm feeling something different than what everyone else is feeling, what is that
Mhm.
try? What should I be learning from that? What is my
Yeah.
environment trying to tell me? What is my body trying to tell me? And so just kind of being in tune, slowing down and
Yeah.
listening, and that there needs to be no shame. So even the darkest feelings that we can have, I deal with one client who, and what, as a therapist, often the hardest thing is a person feeling the shame of, what if I do have an attraction to something
Hmm.
that's like considered inappropriate, and
Yeah.
even by society, even legally. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, well then we have that. What is that trying to tell us? Maybe you need
Yeah.
some healing about some trauma you've experienced, whatnot.
Yeah.
So there should be nothing that can't be dealt with. As James Baldwin says, anything that is nothing can be uh, fixed until it is faced. So we might not be able to fix things, but until it is faced, we
Yeah.
cannot possibly change it.
Yeah. I do think it's important that parents, and a lot of times as you're talking, I'm like, there's so many parents I think that maybe aren't even fully aware of their own emotion. So
Mhm.
it's hard for them when they have little ones to teach them to be aware of their own emotion. But I remember when my kids were little, just I read all the books, and it was like, your kids feel naturally. But help
Mhm.
them label it, help them know what it means, so that when they feel angry, they know they don't just feel it and like get overwhelmed, aren't fully aware of their own emotions, and that's hard for them to help with those kiddos. Um, okay, lastly, is there anything that we didn't speak about today or that you feel like would be really great for people to know based on kind of the topics that we've shared?
I think that it's coming from Paws for Patrick. One of the things I really love about it is that animals are a gateway to talking about mental health in a way that
Mm.
doesn't feel stigma inducing.
Yeah.
Often when you talk to anybody about their animal, they will just they'll mention, oh, he or she
Hmm.
makes me feel so good. And the more that we normalize that mental health is just health, and that
Yeah.
people are really excited to put up their run time on their half marathon, but that,
Hmm.
so we shouldn't be shamed about any of that.
Yeah.
And this idea that every mental health challenge that we have also comes with a superpower.
Yeah.
That anxiety's superpower is an awareness. That
Yeah.
ADHD's superpower can be a level of creativity. So
Hmm.
that when our greatest weakness is our greatest strength. And even things like depression, I have never met a person who's dealt with depression that didn't also tap into a deep source of empathy. So
Hmm.
to help all people to realize that you're not bad or good, you have what you have, and now how we can take that and make you the perfect fit for where you need to be in life. It isn't
Yeah.
necessarily good that a person had depression anymore. That'd be good that they had cancer, but now that they have it, how can we
Mm.
turn that into a superpower to make you have a great fit in this world?
Yeah, I love the way that you list that because it's so true. With the anxiety and be just, hyper aware. Again, I had a session today from someone where I was like, I feel like those that struggle with anxiety are just sometimes know other people more than those people know themselves because they're
Hmm.
just very aware. And so changing your mindset around that, where it's like, I'm struggling with something, but how can I turn it into a positive? That maybe that challenge has given me something that other people don't have.
Yeah, and if I wasn't struggling with that, what would I had? We had one girl who was checking her grades online over 60
Mhm.
times a day. But when we
Mm,
got her to cut back from her anxiety, she stopped caring at all and barely graduated from
yeah,
high school. So
yeah,
this again, we think everything back to this idea that everything has a function.
yeah,
And now instead of saying it's really there's no right or wrong way to be, the question is just where do you want to get to?
yeah,
And if we can
yeah,
fall in love with our destination, if we can be architects in building that
yeah,
destination that we want to get to, we never get there completely. But if we
yeah,
can love the idea of where we're going, then we can be
mhm,
so much happier. But when we
yeah,
consistently say, I just hate where I've been and I'm convinced I'm always going to be in that place. Well, yeah,
mm,
you're going
yeah,
to.
exactly. That's good. Self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, so tell anyone listening where they can find you if they're interested in maybe Pause for Patrick or even working with you or knowing more about you, where would they go?
Yeah. So for Pause for Patrick, it's just pauseforpatrick.org and just the
Mhm.
website, and they'll be able to find more information and click on there to. There's just a little chat thing that will help them fill out to get more
Okay.
information. And for me, I'm on my podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Not Allowed to Die. I may
Okay.
be starting another podcast, just an ESA cast, if I get enough interest in
Awesome.
that. So for people who
Okay.
have people encourage, reach out and encourage me. And people can email me directly at dmaiglerlcsw@gmail.com if they have
Okay.
questions.
Okay. And I will put all of that in the, comment section. And you have a YouTube too.
Yes, yeah. So the
Yes. Okay.
podcast is also on YouTube when I have guests. So
Okay.
when it's just Mariska and I opining about the nature of the universe, we don't put that on YouTube. But when there's a
Just on
guest, we do.
Spotify. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a lot of really great information.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah. We'll talk to you soon.